This is a superhero talk show about culture of superheroes and comic books. Today my guests are going to be, of course, my partner in crime fighting, Mr. Greg Burrow. He is the Batman to my Robin. You can always find his cosplay at GB Cosplay on Instagram and Facebook. He's here representing Dragon's Lair Comics and Games. You can check them out at dlair.net/Austin, where you can find all your comics and fun gaming supplies and stuff. My husband and partner for everything else, Mr. Bo West. He's going to be representing the Heroes of Texas Volunteer Organization that we work with. You can actually catch all of us in Laredo on the 25th for the South Texas Collectors Expo. We're going to be there representing Niños Casa organization. And then our good friend, Mr. Michael Carson, who is, we call him Other Thor. So he's you can find him at ATX Thor on Facebook and social media. Today we are going to be talking about comic book superheroes and the legends that started them. Basically what I call proto-superheroes. Superheroes before comic books. And to start with, I'm going to delve into mythology. Now, a lot of people consider comic books to be a modern mythology, and it's really interesting to see how a lot of it syncs up. A lot of it is just kind of coincides with the mythology. A lot of it's just straight up ripping off the mythology. A lot of it's a little bit more subtle than you would know and think of, but there's so much rich history in comic books that go back way back before even comic books were published, even before publication, when hero stories were oral and carried on by myth. So
and cave paintings.
And cave paintings, exactly. Cave paintings, you might argue cave paintings and hieroglyphics were the original graphic novels, right?
Yeah.
So
That's one way to look at it.
So well. I have to tell the story of this epic hunt.
yeah, exactly. That's kind of how the mythology and stuff started, and to not only just explain things that they didn't understand, but also to inspire people to either do better or be better, either hunt better or find
at least
food better,
not be worse.
or at least not be worse, right? Maybe just to explain how things happen or work. It's just like all kinds of fun stuff. So we're going to start with, of course, everybody's favorite and probably the most well-known, the Greek mythology. Greek and Roman mythology goes all the way back to the gods Zeus and being born of the Titans and creating a plethora of gods and goddesses to explain everything from the moon to the sun to death, etc., etc. And a big part of the epic hero scope in Greek and Roman mythology, it comes from demigods. Demigods are children of gods and mortals, and they come about in various sometimes more nefarious ways than others. So, of course, the biggest one being Hercules. So, who wants to talk about Hercules and their experience with Hercules? What they've heard, what they remember? What's the first Hercules you recall? That's a very...
It's Heracles.
Heracles, this is true too. Heracles is also the correct pronunciation of Hercules.
I mean, there are plenty of stories about him. I mean, there's and I'm probably going to pronounce this one wrong after giving you grief for it, but there's the Nemean lion.
Yeah. Golden Fleece.
Yeah, Golden Fleece.
The 7 trials, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were 7 trials of Hercules. Some of them were...
there was the one time he played with his uncle's dog.
Yeah. The thing about Heracles is that they've sanitized him a lot.
Oh,
through
yes.
modern history.
Very much so.
We'll get to the Amazons a little bit later, but there were quite a few things that I don't know that I would consider particularly heroic. One of the actual, I think it's 8 feats of Hercules, they always leave the last one out, is he got all of King Midas's daughters? Which king?
Oh, I'm trying to blank now.
I know. 50 daughters. He got them all pregnant in one
I thought
night.
it was only 40.
No, it was 50.
It was 50?
No. You're right. It was $40. He had 50 children because there were like several sets of twins.
Yeah.
So that's where all of Hercules' children came from. He actually, that was one of his feats. So
It was one night.
In one night. So I guess,
it talks to stamina at least.
Some misogynistic, Roman, I'm sure that was a heroic feat, but not so much these days. To say the least. But some of the other ones were pretty cool. My first Hercules, my first anything mythology when I was a kid was like the Ray Harryhausen movies. I loved Jason the Argonauts, the Hercules one,
Sinbad.
Sinbad stuff. Yeah, those were the mythologies that I really took a liking to.
Clash of the Titans.
The original Clash of the Titans. I love that one.
Even though, it did inspire me to start learning and studying mythology, and found out there was like a ton of that was completely wrong.
So wrong.
Like there was like errors of stories that didn't even match up. But I don't know. Some really fun ones came out of that. What are the other ones that are really cool? There's the Disney Hercules.
Yeah. Kevin Sorbo Hercules.
I love the Kevin Sorbo
Hercules.
Hercules.
What?
I love the Kevin Sorbo
You kind of have to. I mean, they're just candy. They're
Yeah,
just candy.
they are.
They're just
I mean,
fun. They're not too serious, but
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's
And then,
actually-
of course, that brought us Xena. So
Yeah.
And
And
that's
you
a
gotta
good
love
one.
Xena.
Hercules was actually the Hercules series with Kevin Sorbo was very much meant to use Hercules in a superhero type role, and
Yes.
it was
Yeah,
done in
absolutely.
a more superhero and very much in the way that the Shazam series from the 70s inspired a female spinoff in ISIS.
Yeah.
So true.
That's where the Sam Raimi actually created the Xena show. He watched Shazam growing up, and so he created the Xena spinoff. Shazam is one of the major comic book superheroes in mythology-based characters, because he gets all of his powers from various Greek gods or entities. For those of you who don't know, we've talked about him before, and he's had his movie this past summer. Shazam, originally known as Captain Marvel, was the first major...
Still known as Captain Marvel.
to a lot of fans, yeah.
To a lot of fans, yes.
but-
Some of us are having trouble with change.
But Superman, being the technically first super comic book superhero, was so popular when he came out in the 40s that he was soon met with tons of competition. The only person that really gave him a run for his money was Fawcett Comics' Shazam, or Captain Marvel,
yeah.
who got his powers by saying the magic word Shazam. And rather than being a sci-fi hero like Superman, Shazam / Captain Marvel was magical in nature, and he got his powers from the entities. Shazam, for those of you that don't know, he gets the wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, the stamina of Atlas, the power of Zeus, the endurance of Achilles, and the speed of Mercury. And that's where the Shazam comes from. That's his magic word that he says to turn into Captain Marvel. So
How does Achilles rank getting up in there?
I don't know. Solomon's not technically a god either, so.
Yeah,
But Achilles, I mean,
give you.
He becomes kind of like a demigod. I mean, because he bathes himself in the blood of, I can't think of the serpent's name now. And yeah, there we go. And he becomes pretty much invincible except for his Achilles heel. Right.
Well,
So
his mother dipped him in the blood.
Yeah.
oh, that's right.
And that's
That's where she was holding him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where she was holding it by the heel. So.
Yeah, it just seems to me that she didn't give enough forethought to go dip, 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 dip. But you know.
Achilles.
Everyone's got to have a weakness, though.
Right, yeah.
You got to have a weakness.
Achilles is one of the more noble of the Greek heroes to me. I mean, I don't recall any less than favorable feats with him. But you got the Iliad and the Odyssey. Definitely, Homeric verse is some of the earliest, best example of what would today be considered superhero stuff.
Yeah.
Especially as times has progressed from the 40s and the medium of comic book superheroes become more serious and more adult, and we have more challenging storylines and more in-depth action between them. Yeah, it's definitely a lot more like Greek tragedy sometimes. So it's actually pretty epic in that nature too. Wonder Woman, obviously.
Yeah.
We all know and love Wonder Woman.
And she's inspired, of course, by the Amazons as a Amazon.
As an Amazon.
Yeah. I personally am a bigger fan of her original origin story.
Yeah.
Because she was not the daughter of Zeus, which I like that literally no man had a hand in her creation. That to me, it was perfect for her characterization. She didn't need to have her father be Zeus. She was a power in and of her own right.
Yeah.
And that was one of the other things, I got to be honest, kind of bugged me about the Wonder Woman movie, was not just them making Zeus her father, but Zeus being the one responsible for giving the Amazons the island. In the original origin, none of the male gods had anything to do with Wonder Woman or the Amazons on Themyscira.
It was
It was
Hera
all.
and-
It was Hera. It was Aphrodite.
Yeah.
It was all the female goddesses. Well, female
And the only
gods.
man
Yeah.
there was Hades, but that's because they trapped him there.
Yeah. So to me, that's a much better origin than, we've been lying to you all these years. It's time to tell you who your real daddy is.
But at the same time, it kind of fits with Greek mythos. 'cause,
Well, no,
I mean,
that's very true. That is very true. Zeus did not know how to keep it in his tunic.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Definitely
So,
just made her manhole.
yeah.
So,
And I mean, I think that, it's also kind of like,
I mean, at least you see where Hercules got it from.
yeah, but I mean, it's kind of like, so many of the white stories we tell children, like, the stork bringing, and stuff like that. I think that fits with that whole mentality of, oh, I sculpted you out of clay and all this kind of stuff. And so that's how I'm kind of looking at it.
Okay, I will admit, you put it that way, it makes a good argument. It really does. I'm having as much trouble with change on that one as I am with Captain Marvel.
Yeah, no, I like the original story too, but at the same time, I think a lot of the changes coming about are because people are trying to make everything so ultra realistic, and then so they're kind of like,
Yeah.
So I think that's why they did the change.
I'll be honest,
But
that
I'll
whole
admit.
ultra realistic, when we were still doing commissions, that one phrase always bugged me. But can we do something not spandex? Something real world.
Spandex
Spandex exists in the real world.
I know.
They sell it at fabric stores.
I know. So many people in cosplay are afraid of color. Because it's not.
Oh, I
realistic
know.
looking.
I know.
I hear that all the time. It's like, it doesn't look very realistic because it's red instead of like burgundy. I'm like, red is realistic, but
Red's a real color.
Red's a real color.
I mean, as any color is a real color.
But yeah, I loved Greek mythology when I was a kid. I loved I read the Iliad and the Odyssey in middle school, and did so many projects with
Didn't
different
everybody?
I was going to
have
say
to read those in middle school, I
everybody
think?
had to read at least one of them.
Not in my school. It was only the AP literature had to read them.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah, it was not something that I ever read in school.
no, they were
I
all
read 'em.
reading like Trumpet of the Swan or something like that. I don't know. It was like nothing very fun.
I've never even heard of that one.
Really? That wasn't old. That was like an old.
Your
We
dad's
take
a
risks.
librarian.
So yeah, but the Greco-Roman pretty much has had the most, I think, influence on comic books because it's had the most.
There's been
influence
some
on,
Egyptian.
and then some
Yeah.
Egyptian.
There's
we'll get
been.
into
You get a lot-
I mean, Shazam has a lot of Egyptian mythos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was about to say because I love that in more of the modern tellings of
Yeah.
some of the Shazam stuff, Black Adam
Yeah.
says the same magic word. He does not draw his powers from the same gods.
No.
So the S stands for one of the Egyptian gods and so forth. Don't ask me which ones.
Yeah.
I was not prepared for that conversation.
And then
but,
there's a couple of Chinese heroes that draw from the Chinese gods and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So.
Oh, there's several different ones. The Greco-Roman being, of course, the most obvious. When I first was reading comics in the 90s, or late 80s, early 90s, and DC had a War of the Gods, which I thought was particularly fun, which was when they had the actual Greek and Roman gods somehow both manifested and were fighting each other for dominance. And one chose Wonder Woman as their champion, and the other one chose Shazam as their champion. So it was or Captain Marvel. So it was actually kind of a fun little throwdown because it was actually the first time that DC Comics had integrated Captain Marvel proper into the DC universe.
Right.
Because he hadn't even had his own series yet. Prior to that, for those of you who don't know, when Captain Marvel first came out, he was so close to Superman that DC Comics actually sued for copyright infringement and put them out of business. And ironically, years later, bought the rights to
Same
Shazam.
character.
Yeah.
However, by that time, Marvel had copyrighted the name Captain Marvel. So even though DC could make comic books about Captain Marvel, they could not call the actual comic book Captain Marvel. They called it Shazam. And so when the TV series came out,
that conversation's in our Shazam episode.
but when the TV show came out, they called it Shazam. It became very popular. It had the spin-off ISIS, became very popular. So they started producing the comic books, which were a separate universe. As we talked about last time,
Of
our
course,
last
now there are
episode
so
for
many
the year.
Superman knockoffs, no one cares.
So yeah, nobody cares. But last time on our show, we talked about the Crisis on Infinite Earths and how it combined the different universes together. War of the Gods was the first storyline after the combination of the universes in which the Shazam Captain Marvel universe was merged into.
Was a part of the
So it
main
was
DC
really
continuity.
It was really kind of fun for them to go, oh hey, we've got these two characters and like their central thing is mythology. Let's pit them against each other. And so that actually turned out to be pretty cool. I think the only comic I vividly remember was The Flash when he gets caught in the middle of a race between Mercury and Hermes. So that was kind of a fun one. I like that one a lot. So.
And of course, we need to talk about Viking mythos.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
Norse
so-
mythology.
The Norse.
Yeah.
Norse mythology.
We have two Thors here. So.
Thors. That's why I brought my Thors. So to talk the Thors, Norse Germanic mythology, and that's kind of also along the lines of Greco-Roman in that there are multiple iterations congruent that are slightly different. So in some versions it's Odin, some it's Wotan, some it's Thor, some it's Donner, and they're essentially the same but slightly different in the same way that, you know, Mercury and Hermes are different. They have like slightly different aspects to them. What's your favorite Thor stuff? When did you first encounter Thor?
I see a big smile on his
I'll let
face.
you go first.
I think absolutely my favorite one is where the giants steal Thor's hammer and he has to go pose as a bride to win it back.
Yes.
Him and Loki.
Yeah, that is a classic one.
Yeah, that's so good. And there's a couple different tellings of it, but that one probably overall is probably my favorite one because just the things they go through to get there. Thor dressed in a gown, the veil over his head, still eating multiple oxen and drinking multiple beers, and the giants like
Still being
completely oblivious to it. Yeah. I think that was actually probably one of my very first even introductions to Thor.
Yeah, my first Thor was on the Amazing Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
It's probably mine also,
yeah,
to be honest.
the cartoon where they introduced Thor and Loki was like way different. It's why when the movie came out and I saw Loki, I'm like, this is so not what I think of when I think of Loki, because I think of Loki on par with, you know, Cobra Commander. He's like, he's got the whining and, you know, kind of, but it was pretty fun because that's when I first found out about my name. When I was learning Norse mythology, I'm descended from Norse Germanic, and my last name West. My original family name was Vestry. For those of you who don't know, in Norse mythology, when Odin slays his father Ymir to create the world, he uses Ymir's skull to hold in the sky, and he charges 4 dwarves to hold up the skull: Sutri, Notri, Vestry, and Ostri. And those are where we get the names North, South, East, and West, is from the names of the dwarves. And so West is Vestry, the western dwarf. So I always thought that was super fun and kind of graphic and gruesome. I mean, when you learn that the mountains are made from his bones, and the sea is made from his blood, and the trees are made from his hair, and then like his sinew is...
So he really
it's like,
was a blue blood.
oh yeah, they just totally like, him and his brothers like eviscerated, killed. So that's kind of gruesome. But I think that's kind of fun. I liked the Spider-Man cartoon with Thor in it, though. It was kind of neat.
Yeah, outside of it, my first introduction to Thor outside of the mythology was Adventures in Babysitting.
Yes! I remember that.
I love that one.
I remember that. That was fun. Well, you know what was really fun about that is that's Vincent D'Onofrio.
Oh yeah.
That was
Yeah,
Vincent D'Onofrio
that's
who
right.
played Thor as the mechanic that they thought was Thor. Which, in case you know you're not like a super hardcore comic geek, years later he plays Kingpin on the Daredevil shows. Well, that's actually kind of a fun little Marvel callback there. But I remember that. I remember that because it was so fun that like Thor. I mean, yeah, popular among comic book geeks, wasn't really big.
Yeah,
culturally the way it is.
culturally it wasn't a big thing then.
Not the way it is
And
now,
so
anyway. It's not like he had his own cartoon. or
Yeah,
anything.
for us as kids, seeing that scene was one of my favorite parts of that movie. Oh, I forgot about that.
You're missing your magic helmet. Here, take mine.
What about the Saturday Night Live sketch with the classic Saturday Night Live sketch where they're having a party?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Classic Saturday Night Live?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been
You
allowed
would've
to
been-
watch.
Oh, wow. Okay. You need to go back and watch
I've
it.
seen it though. I know what
I
you're
thought
talking
I
about.
showed it to you.
No.
Because oh my gosh.
I'm not I know this is probably one of those sacrilege
Belushi
things
was
to
the
say. I'm not a real
So-
big Saturday Night fan.
So the comedian, and
Yeah,
I feel so
I
bad.
know.
I don't remember his name, but the black comedian that played Ant-Man in that,
Oh, yeah.
he was the cab driver in Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Grant Morris, right? No.
No.
No, Grant Morris is.
But yeah, no, I do remember you telling me that. Yeah, he was the cab driver
and I can see his face. He's
Garrett
very-
Morris?
when he falls and
Garrett,
lands.
I don't remember.
I can't remember
I
his
can see
name.
his face, but I don't remember. But I do remember that he had a cameo in Ant-Man, and that was the gag, was that he was the first person to technically play Ant-Man in live action. So that was kind of funny. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, there are kinds of fun stuff like that. Now, one thing that is really fun about Thor is that up until Marvel,
Yeah, Thor wasn't originally
Thor was
blonde.
not blonde.
I did
in
know
the
that
original
one.
mythology.
Nope,
Thor is a
he's a
redhead.
redhead.
Thor in all the
That
mythology.
explains so much.
All other forms in all mythology, Thor is a redhead.
That fiery temper.
Yeah,
Gets
so
his temper.
and you kind of got a feeling back in the day that there was just like a little too much blonde hair, blue eye going around in Marvel at the beginning, but so we had Thor and Captain America, and I think just about everybody else, but he was pretty unique in the blonde hair thing. I think they did that just to separate him, and I think even
So, fun little factoid there. Timely Comics.
Yes.
There was a short run. I don't know the name of the run or anything. With the Norse gods, Thor. That version of Thor was a redhead.
Yes.
and they do eventually bring a redheaded Thor into the comic.
Yeah, that's actually not Thor though.
I know.
That's a troll posing as Thor under magic.
Was that the troll?
Yes, because Loki was
about
the only one who saw through the deception.
Oh, yes,
that
But
one.
of course, no one
I
believed
was-
little kid Loki.
I was talking about the guy who actually.
Thunderstrike?
No.
No?
There was
Nope,
another one before
Thunderstrike was
He's
also
also
blind.
blonde.
Yeah.
Blonde.
No, there was another
Blind.
one before Thunderstrike.
I know.
That there was another one before Thunderstrike because
Was there?
Odin was trying to cheat the Ragnarok prophecy, and he
No.
tricked somebody else in a big.
I don't remember. So as for that one, as I remember it, he had trapped Thor. Eric Masterson, who became Thunderstrike, took up the mantle of Thor. That would be the era of Thor comic books where he wore the mask over
Yes.
attached to the helmet, so that people didn't know he wasn't really Thor.
even though he had his body. I don't
Even
know.
though he had his body, but whatever. But yeah, it was when Thor got released that Odin decided to reward him by giving him the Thunderstrike mallet.
But you know what? Anything is better than the '90s Thor, where he has
Lord.
the crop top and the heavy metal hair. Yeah, if you ever, look it up.
Pretty much
on a-
anything is better than a crop top and heavy metal hair.
Yeah.
Look it
I'm
up
going to
on
have
an
to throw
indie
this
site.
out here.
Or just don't
Jane
look it up.
Foster Thor is freaking amazing. Okay.
Oh yeah.
You know, I gotta say I'm impressed. It took you that long to say it. Not that I disagree, but
So
One of my favorite Marvel comics in the past, I don't know how many years. It's
Yeah,
just
Thor's
absolutely
actually
wonderful.
it makes me look forward to the next Thor movie.
because,
Oh,
because
God,
of the
Love and
movies,
Thunder,
because
yeah.
of the movies that did pick up a lot of steam, but Thor had a really good, strong following. He's one of the original. He was one of the original Avengers.
Yep.
Your casual fan doesn't know that Captain America was not an original Avenger.
Yep.
It was Iron Man, Thor, and Hulk, and Ant-Man and the Wasp. And also,
Back in the day when Iron Man had skates, wasn't able to fly.
I know, right?
I
He didn't even have
forgot.
skates yet. He didn't even
No,
have
you're right. He
skates.
didn't even
Oh,
have the skates yet.
But Thor was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And Jack Kirby is very influential on a number of designs and things. And one of my favorite things about Jack Kirby's Thor was the style. It was very stylized. It was very unique for the time. He was the one who created the whole idea of the Norse gods having a super science edge to them. So it wasn't just magic, but it was magic and science. So a lot of his stuff had these angles and geometric patterns and shapes, and it really became a really cool, distinctive visual. And it's things that all the way up into the movie and even to the costumes for the movies and the designs, you can see those influences.
Yeah.
You can go back and look and go,
Very
okay,
much so.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how accurately Norwegian or dramatic this is, but it's definitely on brand
for Kirby.
Thor. And so it was really fun to, and this is carrying on with Kirby and his whole idea of epic mythology. He had like these huge stories and ideas and arcs planned with designs, and he used so many characters other than Thor,
Yeah.
Balder and Loki and Tyr, and he went like neck deep in the mythology.
Yeah,
But-
I mean nowadays pretty much the only ones you see are Thor, Sif, and Loki.
Yeah, if they weren't in the movies, they don't get as much airtime.
Yeah.
But
yeah, he used the whole pantheon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but Kirby kind of got irritated with Marvel for pushing Stan Lee as a superstar creator, and he didn't really feel like he was getting enough credit for what he was doing. Hence comes in DC Comics.
DC going,
And
we'll give you credit.
like,
Come to the dark
come
side.
to our side and we'll put your name all over everything. You got full credit, and that's where we get the New Gods.
The new gods,
Yeah.
yeah.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with the New Gods, the Steppenwolf, one of the New God characters, was the villain in the Justice League movies, a much maligned Justice League movie. Darkseid is the character that it gets a lot of credit for being a Superman villain, but actually the Jack Kirby's Fourth World was meant to be his continuation of those stories without Thor. So it's like
Which
Thor without Thor,
you
Asgard
have to
without Asgard.
you have
Yeah.
to love, because in some of the opening panels of New Gods, the Fourth World, you're seeing some of the leftover destruction
Of the old gods.
gods. And if you pay attention, one of the things that is in one of the panels is Thor's helmet.
Yeah, you can actually see that he actually
Marvel Thor's
he
helmet.
actually destroyed the old gods in his comic to create the new gods, which was interesting and cool, and you can see the style and everything that moved over to that.
But I do have to step in real quick and just say that with how deep these stories were and how complex, it is mind-boggling how 4 men were able to create all of the beginning of Marvel like that.
Yeah.
I mean, how many books were they coming out with each month? I mean, they had Spider-Man, they had Doctor Strange, they had Captain America, they had Avengers, they had
Fantastic
Iron Man,
Four,
they had Fantastic Four, they
X-Men.
had
anthology, they still have
Thor,
Marvel
they
Comics
had
anthology. They
I
had,
mean, and all these were coming out once a month.
Yeah.
And it's unheard of to think
And it
about
was
that many people
Stan
coming
Lee
out
and
with,
Jack
and they were
Kirby
all
and-
powerful,
Yeah.
strong
Steve Ditko.
books and
Steve
characters
Ditko, yeah.
that are still going today. That's just so impressive, and I just
No, it really is. I mean, just the astounding level of work that came out of them, the stories.
Who helped Stan Lee with the original Inhumans? Was it also Kirby? Because
I imagine if it wasn't Kirby, it was probably Joe Simon, maybe.
Yeah.
Or because it was
they
Steve
use a lot of
Ditko.
the Kirby dots and Kirby style design for the Inhumans.
Yeah, I want to say
Yeah.
because Marvel tried promoting the Inhumans and making them a new thing, but that ended up failing. And so now
So it was
that
Joe
they-
Simon and Jack Kirby that did Captain America, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And then Steve
that?
Ditko did Spider-Man, and then Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
But most of the other books were
Which,
Kirby.
again, because of Marvel's treatment of Stan versus the others, Ditko eventually went over to...
That wasn't the main reason why Ditko.
No.
Ditko and Stan had very different political views.
Yeah.
Well,
and
yeah.
So
No, there's always more to the story.
I've heard stories of like how, Stan would do an outline, and then Steve Ditko would do the entire story and suggest lettering, and then Stan would come back in and change the lettering. So it would be like where Steve Ditko would have it where Spider-Man's swinging through a college campus and people are protesting, and he's like, "Oh, they need to get back to class," and stuff like that. And then Stan Lee was like, "Oh, I wish I could join them," so Steve's like, "What are you doing?" So that was from what I understand, that was more of why Steve didn't want to have anything to do with
that I didn't know.
Yeah, that's why Steve Ditko didn't want to have anything to do with Stan Lee.
Going back to the Norse gods and the fun little back and forth between the two publishers, Marvel and DC. Of course, DC having the new gods to kind of, they wanted their piece of the whole Thor mythology. And then it turns right around and DC goes and creates the Eternals, which is basically their version of the new gods. And for those of you who are not aware,
Marvel creates these.
Marvel. So it's like
I got confused there for a second.
You're right. So first they're at Marvel, then they're at DC, then they're at Marvel again. So the
It's a shell game. See if you can keep up.
I know. The Eternals movie coming out very soon also has a lot of those epic god elements into it. I think I'm not really sure I'm like super stoked about the Eternal movie. I wasn't really that into the Eternals.
I'll be honest, I'm not really familiar with the Eternals other than the fact that they were created by the really tall guys.
Yeah, I hate to say this.
Celestial, thank you.
The only Marvel movie coming up right now that in the next couple of years that I know of that I'm really looking forward to is Love and Thunder.
I got to be honest, especially after they dropped the new trailer, I'm once again excited about New Mutants.
That's technically not MCU.
Okay, no.
That's
I'm still looking for like Black Widow.
I think Black Widow.
I'm looking forward to WandaVision.
WandaVision.
Loki. I'm looking forward to Loki.
Doctor Strange, I'm looking forward to as well. So
the TV shows are going to be pretty cool.
Well, I'm talking about movies, but
the Eternals,
Well,
the Eternals are talking about the gods, and the Eternals are meant to be another.
Most of the TV series coming out, I'm really looking forward to. I'm looking forward to She-Hulk. I'm looking forward to Moon Knight. I'm looking forward to.
Well, and
Moon
so
Knight is
I was
Egyptian mythology. So that's gonna be a cool.
Telling Brad, sorry, spoilers. The Loki TV show.
Yeah.
They're going to halfway through and periodically beforehand. What, you don't want me to say?
No, go for it.
Okay. They're going to be switching out actors for Thor, or for Loki. I mean, because of course in the comic books, more modernly, he's had many forms. He's been a woman, he's been a kid, he's been himself, he's been a teenager, you know. And so they're going to be playing off of that in the show from a couple of articles I read into the him getting locked in for a sufficient portion of it, apparently, as Kid Loki. Okay. So that's kind of one of the reasons I'm looking forward to that.
The only thing that I'm sad about hearing that is that Tom Hiddleston just does such an amazing job.
So he's
fantastic.
He's still supposed to narrate.
Yeah, he's still narrating.
But
because if you read the books, even as
Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah, because even in the comic books, as Kid Loki, he interacted with his adult form a couple of times. So it's not to say that, hey, we're going to go with this kid now, because they're even saying before it gets back to where he's supposed to show up in the next movie, it'll be Tom Hiddleston again.
Yeah.
No.
You know, they're not going, we're done with him. They're going, we're going to give him a chance to pursue his own career.
I'm pretty sure they're going to use Tom Hiddleston as much as they possibly can. Because he's such a fan favorite.
Oh, he is. Let's face it. I don't think Loki would have the level of popularity, even in the comic books, that he does now, if not for Tom Hiddleston.
No, he really rejuvenated that character.
Yes, he did.
No, like I said before that, he was just like mustache twirly.
Yeah.
And blonde, too, by the way.
He's also blonde.
He's also blonde. That's another thing I remember about Loki. He never had dark hair.
Tom Hiddleston's portrayal was amazing.
It was.
Greek gods and such in the Eternals, though, Angelina Jolie is playing Athena, who from the actual comic book, there's a running gag where she gets mad because many of her temples were co-opted by the Greek Athena. So that's one of her things. But also, who is playing Circe in that? Everybody assumed that Angelina Jolie was going to play Circe, who was, like a witch from the Odyssey and stuff. But, I guess Angelina Jolie's been typecast witch enough, so I don't know.
She wants to break character.
She wants to break character, I guess, maybe. I mean, maybe file down those cheekbones and what's left. Anyway.
Wow. Really?
Well, I actually saw how they added to her cheekbones for Maleficent, and it was kind of creepy. It was super creepy. But I don't know. We got Wonder Woman. We got Thor.
I'm so looking forward to 84.
Wonder Woman 84.
Wonder Woman 84. Yes.
If you haven't seen the new trailer, go see it. It's amazing.
It is awesome.
I'm looking forward to it too. I'm curious how it's going to differentiate.
I mean, she just
how
rides
much of
lightning. It's no big thing.
But I would like to,
I'm not sure how I feel about that scene.
Oh, I love it.
I liked.
It's entirely.
I never really read Wonder Woman individually outside of things that she was connected to. I did very much like when I was reading Young Justice, Wonder Girl, the new Wonder Girl from the 90s, whose mother was an archaeologist, and she stole weapons to mimic Wonder Woman's powers. So at first, the new Wonder Girl was actually pretty interesting to me. I liked her character.
Well, I've read the Golden Age Wonder Woman. I've read a lot of the modern stuff, and it's very interesting. The character obviously morphs over time.
Yeah.
Different creators come in and change things up. I think Greg Rucka's run of Wonder Woman. I mean, anything Greg Rucka does is just absolutely amazing. He's one of the best writers in the comic industry right now. He's just absolutely amazing. They just released a new, I want to say kids young adult book, Diana, Princess of the Mascara.
I saw that sitting on your coffee table last night.
I loved it. It was really cute, but it dealt with some serious issues. But it was all about, she wasn't a baby anymore. She was a young child. And no one had time for her anymore because, when she was a baby, everybody was like, "Oh, I'm not cuddling," and because she's
a
the
baby
only
for
baby.
the first time in millennia.
Yeah, and so everybody's like all cuddling her and all this kind of stuff. And now she's, a little girl, and nobody has time for her anymore.
Yeah.
And she has no one to play with, so she's kind of dealing with all this, and it was kind of an interesting take on it because I was like, I can see a child having problems with that. Going, hey, wait a minute, I have no one to play with, and all the adults are like, she's right in that age where it's like
she's in that age where you need to go away. You're in the way.
Yeah.
Talking about rejuvenating Wonder Woman, after Crisis on Infinite Earths, as we were talking about, and George Perez took over Wonder Woman, he was the first to really completely.
Yeah.
Her comic books had sold better than they had in years, and this first time they had kept up with any of her male contemporaries. He did some really cool things, including adding more of the warrior aspect to her. The new movie 1984, you see the trailers with the eagle armor. That was something that George Perez introduced in the comic book during the War of the Gods story arc, which was really kind of cool.
One of my things that always made me really appreciate Wonder Woman is not only was she strong, not only was she a warrior and everything, but she was a teacher. The whole reason, other than of course the original bringing Steve Trevor back, the whole reason she came to man's world is to help educate us and as a diplomat. And I think that's one of the reasons I have such a big issue with some of the more modern stuff, particularly
they play down the compassion angle.
Particularly the whole DC New 52.
That's why I think
Wonder
Gal
Woman
Gadot
had
is doing
to be
an amazing
Wonder
job.
Woman had to be told she couldn't be so brutal by a man.
Yeah.
When I saw that issue and Batman was having to correct her on her behavior, I'm done.
Yeah, but
there were several things that I hated, but there's several things that I loved. I loved New Frontier, where
New
Superman
Frontier was great.
is trying to tell her that, and she stands up and goes, "Excuse me."
You're right. Yeah.
And Superman's actually looking up at her because in New Frontier she's taller.
Yeah. Oh, she's an Amazon.
and it's just to either read or watch that. It's really cool. It's a McCarthy era version of the DC comic book, and
It's
Wonder
right in
Woman,
between the Golden Age and the Silver Age because they
Wonder
never
Woman is
explain
voiced by
that shift.
Lucy Lawless.
Yeah.
What you say it by Lucy Lawless. You know Lucy Lawless. So
But,
it's kind of fun.
But
He does
I
that
mean,
version.
I really
Yeah.
hated whenever they tried to take away from her. Like, for example, one of the reasons why I didn't like Justice League was they downplayed Wonder Woman's power because she's supposed to be as strong and as magnificent as Superman. And then
Exactly.
Superman comes in and is like, oh, nothing but things, slapping people around, and it's like, and it's like, no, Wonder Woman is as strong.
She can
as,
stand toe to toe with the Man of Steel.
And and in order to make Superman better, they're trying to take her down, and I didn't like that at all.
Well,
and
unfortunately,
I didn't
that's
like
still
in the comics when they took away her powers.
Still a thing with males and literature and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, so many men are
we're
writing
working on that, people.
female characters.
Yeah.
No. Wonder Woman can be strong in completely different ways. One of my favorite things about the George Perez reinvention of her, for those of you who are not aware, the W logo that looks like a W instead of an eagle. For up until Crisis, her logo was an eagle. And George Perez created
Huge
this.
and obvious eagle.
It was an obvious eagle. And George Perez created this design kind of in line with Superman's S, something more marketable, which is an eagle-shaped W. So a W with wings and kind of it's more eagle-y. And the in-story explanation for this was actually kind of fun. If you actually get a chance to read this, is a group of women's lib activists asked her to help them spread more liberty to women and help to represent women's education, women's rights, and they gave her this new logo to help promote them, and that was part of her story in comic book. So another, like Greg Rucka.
Yeah, it didn't just happen. There was a reason behind it.
Phil Jimenez is another great Wonder Woman artist/writer who is yeah, and it was a little cliche, you know, you got your gays and your Wonder Woman love from Linda Carter, but he was the first gay man to completely take over editorial stuff for Wonder Woman, and I think it sold even better than Greg Rucka's run did. He just like blew it out the water. So if you ever get a chance to read the Phil Jimenez run on Wonder Woman, amazing. He does the art and the illustrations and the writing. It's some great stuff. Other gods. We've got the Greeks, the Romans, and some of the Egyptians. Moon Knight.
Yeah.
That's one that I love. Moon Knight. He's loosely based on a Egyptian god of vengeance, Khonshu. I love Moon Knight. I have been waiting for this show since like the day that Netflix debuted Daredevil. The Daredevil Netflix show, when that show came on, I'm like, okay, my mind is like, this would be the perfect environment for Moon Knight. I'm gonna love this character. For those of you who are not familiar with him, you'll love him. Imagine Batman if Bruce Wayne didn't know he was Batman. So he's a mercenary who gets left for dead in the desert and gets rescued by the moon god Khonshu. You never really know if he really did or didn't.
Yeah, the real questions come down to, did he really?
Did he really?
But he goes back and
Or is he just off his meds?
Basically, he has multiple dissociative personality disorder, and none of his personalities are aware that the other personalities are him. So his equivalent of Alfred is a cab driver named Jake Lockley. He doesn't know that he's his cab driver.
He has an actual equivalent of Alfred.
Oh, does he?
has an actual butler friend who, in the books, turned out to be gay.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Because who killed him?
Can't believe I had to tell you that.
Anyway.
But no, the cab driver was one of his underworld informants. It was him.
It was him.
Moon Knight was him. Mark Spector was him. But Mark Spector didn't know he was Moon Knight.
Thinks that he's just fronting the money for Moon Knight. So it's a pretty cool concept, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it on the show. But
yeah,
it depends on who was writing it. One of the best runs during the late 80s was The Fists of Khonshu, which was the first one where they actually had him have superpowers. Again, you never really know if it turns out if he did or didn't, but supposedly he got more powerful with the Faces of the Moon. And then the one I liked from the early 2000s was the Brian Michael Bendis one, where he moves to California and he lost all of his other personalities. He got kicked out of the Avengers, so his other personalities were the Avengers. So it basically he was
doing
Avenger.
team-ups with Spider-Man and Wolverine.
He had these
but
claws.
he wasn't.
He had these claws.
But he wasn't.
He had claws, a shield, and like an equivalent of web shooters. And in his mind, he was going on this adventure with Captain America, Wolverine, and Spider-Man. But it was just him by himself. It was really fun to have Spider-Man in a movie.
And I find it really intriguing where he was created. He was created in Werewolf by Night.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As a villain, actually, an adversary.
Hey, well, yeah, adversary, not villain.
Well, okay, I mean,
And who created him?
Mark Wolfman.
Yeah, Mark Wolfman.
One of our favorites. We talk about him all the time.
Yeah, no, love
But
Mark
yeah,
Wolfman.
back to the origin though is he was rescued by an Egyptian god. You know, so.
Or so he thinks.
So he thinks, yes.
He may or may not.
Yes. Focusing on the Egyptian god part. Pay attention. It's the topic of the show, remember?
No, other really fun ones that are outside of the Greco-Roman, Norse Germanic. That's like pretty much the only Egyptian one. I mean, there's lots of villains that have like.
I mean, DC delves more into the Egyptians with Black Adam and his then wife, now wife. he's a widowed, I don't know, ISIS.
And they created a version of ISIS.
They created a version of ISIS for him. And, you know, he did have dealings with Sekhmet, I think. Yeah.
No, I did actually like the Marvel run of Hercules, some of his stuff. Marvel has, they had enough success with their version of Thor that they eventually created their own heroic version of Hercules. I believe he shows up originally as a foil to Thor, but ends up taking his place on the Avengers for a while. Thor, that version of Hercules does become an Avenger and has his own interesting twists compared to some, to say the least.
And a lot of people say that Greg Pak's run on Hercules is probably the best.
Now, talking about
much.
crossovers, though, I think that was one of my favorite parts of the DC Marvel crossover. Wonder Woman was not a big fan of Hercules when they met.
Oh yeah.
No.
Oh yeah.
No.
I can't imagine why. But yeah, you still got a nod to the old stories, but when Wonder Woman meets him, and she was not a fan.
Not a fan.
I don't know. I think that I don't remember, the only Hercules stories that I really read were some of his team ups. He took over the Hulk's book for a while, and he had some really good stories there.
Well, that's one of the things I have enjoyed in recent years about Marvel when it comes to the gods. You've got, of course, Thor, who has had a long-standing run. They eventually brought in Hercules, and you know they still acknowledge he's only a demigod instead of an actual god. Although at one point he did become a full god. Then he's a demigod. Then he was mortal. Then he's a demi. It gets confusing. Right. But then when there was the whole Dark era where Norman Osborn was in charge of everything, and they brought in Ares. You know, so Marvel had an Ares running around for the first time in a while. Well, ever. And so you've started to see more of the other pantheons, which of course eventually led up to Marvel's War of the Gods called War of the Realms, where, you know, you've got, well, no, before War of the Realms there was God Killer, because there was this alien god that, no, not God, alien, whatever.
He had like a symbiotic relationship with the, oh my gosh, I wouldn't just blank on the
Null?
Yes.
With the Null, which they've recently brought back with Venom, but with the Null, and he was basically pissed because the gods ignored him, you know, as gods in a lot of mythology are wont to do. You're immortal, whatever. And so he went on a divine killing spree. And it took Thor... It took 3 different Thors. Actually, I think it eventually took 4 different Thors. 3 Thors and Jane Foster to actually defeat him. Because it was funny because, you know, at that point she was no longer Thor and everything. But that also led into her Valkyrie book.
She is now Valkyrie.
Oh my gosh, hold on, wait. I forgot. I gotta
yeah. I'm talking this time. But it's a whole time travel thing, which, you know, time travel always gets confusing. So his younger self, who had not been deemed worthy enough to wield the hammer, the modern Thor, and then old man Thor, or King Thor, and you know, so you've got 2 Thors wielding Mjolnir, and then you've got young Thor who's pouting in the background going, well, we all get hammers and I only have an axe. And then...
Yeah, it's still Jornberg.
Yeah, no, it's still a cool axe. Which I still need one of those.
Same.
But eventually when it comes down to having to face off against the God Killer, you know, they're like, he set up a trap that only Thor can enter. And Jane's going... There's still a hammer here, you know? So she picks up a hammer and she's Thor, you know? So she cheats around that loophole, but yeah. So that's one of my favorite stories.
Well,
I love Jane Foster Thor.
Yes, I know you
I
love
love Jane Foster Thor.
I kept meaning to ask, have you seen the internet rumor about Christian Bale yet?
Oh, yes.
He
for
may very well
Roxanne.
be Beta Ray Bill.
No, he's the president of the CEO of Roxanne. Raxon.
it's Roxanne?
Oh.
Yes.
Thor maybe?
Yeah.
So then who was it they were saying was going to be Beta Ray Bill?
Still being hush hush.
Still being hush hush? Okay.
I still want to see Liam. I want to see Liam Hemsworth to be
that
would be
be
funny.
Better Ray
That
Bill.
would be
That
hilarious.
makes a lot more sense because I don't see.
Well, I mean, if he's
Him doing that.
Bradley Cooper is Rocket Raccoon, okay.
But that's Bradley Cooper.
I'm just saying.
Bradley Cooper has a lot more fun than.
Well,
Yeah, Christian Bale is kind of, we'll say reserved.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, for those of you who are not familiar at home, Beta Ray Bill is the alien Thor, and it's like another story. Pick
Fan
up
favorite.
He's a Corbinite.
Fan favorite. Corbinite, you love it. So we'll catch on to that. We've watched American Gods recently on Stars.
You know that.
So that gives you a lot
having
of really
having
fun-
read the book as well as watched the TV series, the American God story was probably one of my favorite novels in most recent time. Simply because not only do you get all the gods, you come to learn as you go through the story that you're getting the Americanized version of the gods. You know, and so if you at this point, if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry, I'm spoiling it anyways. One of my favorite scenes in the TV show was when they go to see a star, or Easter, and all the Jesuses. I mean, there are tons of Jesuses all over this place. You've got baby Jesus being breastfed, you've got Hispanic Jesus, you've got white Jesus, you've got African Jesus, you've got, I mean, all these different Jesuses. Because, let's face it, in American culture, there are so many different representations. And that's one of the commentaries from the actual book. The actual book, there is zero mention of Jesus because Neil Gaiman even goes, I wanted to write that scene, but I just couldn't find a way to make it feel natural. And when they did it in the TV show, it was fantastic. I loved it. But yeah, and so I mean, you eventually find out that Wednesday, that you're dealing with throughout most of the book, is the American version of Odin. They're still Odin and Wotan. They're just in their native countries. Anansi's still in Africa, but there's the American version of Anansi.
I love
Because the
Orlando
people
Bloom.
brought him with it.
Yeah, because the people brought these gods with them.
And the scene where he comes, where Anansi
I know.
comes off
I love that
slave
scene.
ship is just like the most incredible. I swear, if this guy does not get nominated for some kind of Emmy, there is.
And if they don't change their mind and bring him back.
Oh yeah, no, I don't know what.
Yeah, I know.
It's the most amazing thing. If you haven't, and the cool thing about Neil Gaiman is a prolific fantasy writer, but he's really really big comic book writer. We grew up reading him in comic books. For the Sandman series, where he did DC's Vertigo, their first adult line of comic books. Constantine, we're familiar with. Neil Gaiman had a big hand in crafting him from the Swamp Thing saga. I'm sure you're familiar with Swamp Thing. He did a really good job. He was one of the heavy influencers on that genre. And my favorite thing that I read when I was younger from him was the Dreaming, which they're going to be doing as a TV series. It's really actually kind of like this blow up of Neil Gaiman lately because I remember many years ago when he had to produce his own movie to get Mirror Mask made, and we were like, we sucked that up because it was such a good movie. Now they're throwing money at him.
Right. They're like, please let us do more movie stuff with you. But no, kind of back on topic though, talking about the Dreaming. One of my favorite issues on that was, I forget who is with him, but Death and Dream and a third person are wandering the dreamscape, the dreamverse, the whatever, talking to various other gods. And I love how Death may be responsible for why Superman's on Earth, because she was talking to Ra, the representation of the Kryptonian sun god based on their sun, going, it would be epic. I mean, if you just wipe out and they only have the one survivor, just think of the epic stories. that's not a bad idea. Reading that one part, I'm going, I love this.
Very, very meta and very, very into classic mythology. He really dives in deep to stuff, and a lot of his comics and a lot of his books have a lot of that in it.
Well, yes,
definitely
and
American
I think
Gods.
Dream also dated one of the original Guardians before they were Guardians.
Right, but for the
Same
Dreaming,
story arc.
the story Dreaming is about Sandman, Morpheus, who represents Dream. The whole comic book is about a family of concepts. These are brothers and sisters who are all ethereal beings. They represent dreams, despair, death, desire,
desire.
destiny. I forget all 12 of
But
them.
it's funny because two of the characters that are in that story that are often the narrators or the gatekeepers of those stories is Cain and Abel. You know, and Cain is constantly abusing Abel throughout most of those stories that they appear in.
It's a great book. They're going to be doing a Dreaming series, Endless series soon. But very much, I'm excited if it's anywhere near American Gods or Good Omens, which is another one which is used a lot of Christian.
Love Good Omens.
Christian. That was a Neil Gaiman, Terry Gilliam book that Terry Gilliam passed away. And he wrote the screenplay for it. But so those are some really good things. If you want to get into some really amazing mythology comics, look up Neil Gaiman stuff on Jack Kirby's Fourth World or his original Thor run. And thank you so much for joining us. Anybody have any questions or ideas, or is somebody we forgot? Myth guys?
Where do we feel about King Arthur, Arthurian?
That's going to be on our next episode.
Yeah,
that's
next time.
Next time on the Red Web with Brad West, we're going to continue our discussion about the pre-comic book superhero heroes of legend, and we're going to do Western legend and folklore. So we'll get into Arthurian myth and Beowulf and some of those kinds of tales.
Robin Hood.
Robin Hood, all of those guys. So tune in next time, and make sure you follow us on Brad's Red Web at Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Also, go to Kaiju Labs Media on YouTube and like our page, subscribe, and let us know what you think. Questions, suggestions, ideas. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.